It's been an eventful few days. I'd like to start off by asking you if, one, you will run as a provincial candidate in June, regardless of what happens in this leadership race, and two, if you are chosen leader on March 10th, do you plan on signing Patrick Brown's nomination papers, allowing him to run as a PC candidate with the information you now have? Ms. Elliott, we begin with you.
Bonsoir, mesdames et messieurs. Merci à tous qui ont aidé à organiser le débat ici au Ottawa. Je suis très heureux d'être avec vous ce soir. And first, to answer your question about do I intend to run regardless of what happens in this leadership campaign, yes, I do intend to run. I will run in a location that has yet to be determined, but I am going to run. As to Patrick, I have said this from the beginning of this campaign, that he deserves the right to clear his name. And if he is able to clear his name before this election campaign that ends on June 7th, yes, I would allow him to run.
Well, I'm definitely going to run in Etobicoke North. Our family is represented at Etobicoke. My dad represented Etobicoke. My brother represented it. I represented it. My nephew represented it. We're very loyal and grateful to the people of Etobicoke. And as for Patrick Brown, I think, he has to take care of a few things, first of all. And then once I'm premier or leader, we'll sit down, but something, I don't know why we keep talking about Patrick Brown. I'm looking at the future of this party. I'm zoned in on Kathleen Wynne. I'm not worried about him. I'm zoned in on Kathleen Wynne. I'm zoned in on being the next premier.
Ms. Granic.
Well, first off, I think I should say this, is that I'm actually disappointed Patrick Brown isn't here tonight, because I was looking forward to having a real frank discussion with him. In terms of whether I'm going to run, I've said to Leoc that yes, I will. In terms of whether Patrick Brown should be allowed to run for this party, the other candidates have said it before with the Pakin debate, and I was shocked by the responses. But let me make something very clear for you. Patrick Brown does not run for me. He will not be a candidate under my leadership. I have made it very clear why. Not because of the allegations of sexual misconduct levied against him, but because of the corrupt manner in which he has run this party. And I would like these candidates here to really think long and hard about their responses and perhaps maybe revisit the responses about Patrick Brown running under them.
Ms. Mulroney.
Well, I am the only nominated candidate standing here today who made the commitment to run for the party, that decided that defeating Kathleen Wynne was something that I wanted to do before the leadership came up. So I am an MP. I am standing to be a candidate in the riding of York Simcoe. I also said last week that I called upon Patrick Brown to step aside, to take the time that he needed to clear his name and address the allegations that had come up. And I had called on my other colleagues here tonight to do the same. Saying you've cleared your name and clearing your name are different things. I'm glad that he's taken the step to do that. It's the right thing for the party. And so in terms of whether he can run for me, it depends on whether he's able to clear his name in time for the election.
So how would the three of you, because Mr. Ford, you didn't answer the question, so I'm assuming you're in this bunch, how would you determine if Mr. Brown has cleared his name, given what we know so far? You all have 3 minutes to debate this.
Well, first of all, you don't clear your name just because you say you clear your name. That's up to others to decide, and that would have been up to the membership to decide should Patrick have remained in this campaign. And it's up to the membership to make a determination about that for the rest of us as candidates. And the ultimate question is, who do you think is going to be able to lead this party to victory on June the 7th? I believe I'm that candidate. And as to my commitment to the party, I would remind Caroline that I have served for 9 years as an MPP. I've been successfully elected 4 times, and I have no apologies to make for that.
Let me just chime in here. This is all very nice talk, but the three of you have sat idly by while this party has been run into the ground by Patrick Brown and his corruptive practices. So, Caroline, these are very nice words you've just said. Where were you when you signed on to the People's Guarantee? Where was your voice when Patrick Brown was engaging corruption? We had lots of evidence there, folks. And now, in light of all the new evidence that have been levied against him in this past week, you still three stand here and say you're fine with it? I would like you to say no. You're against corruption and you will not let Patrick Brown run under you. Please make this commitment for the grassroots members of this party and for the integrity of this party.
Tanya, I am the only one who asked him to step aside, and I called on the three of you to do the same. You did not. And I came out yesterday talking about the steps that we needed to take as a party to restore integrity and trust and accountability. I'm the only one here who's actually done the work to start to identify the steps that we need to do in terms of making sure that our processes are transparent and fair and that we can restore integrity in the party. I'm the only one who has done that.
2 weeks ago,
everyone keeps talking about other issues. I'm the only one talking about what we need to do.
Caroline, 2 weeks ago you said you were fine with Patrick Brown running under you if he clears his name. You were fully aware of the allegations that were levied against him then. We have even more so now. Will you commit to cleaning up our party, yes or no?
Absolutely, which is what I said yesterday when I came out with the steps that I want to take to restore integrity. But let's be clear, in the last few days, a number of allegations have come up, and that is why last week I asked him to do what was right for the party and step aside, and I was the only one here who did that, and I called on the rest of you to do that, and no one else answered the call. So I have said, and I said publicly, that saying you cleared your name and doing that are not the same thing. But at the same time, he needs to be able to do that outside of the context of this leadership race, which is what he's done. He's taken the first step, and that now it's up to him to do that.
And yet, even still, even if he clears his name on those allegations of sexual misconduct, for which I'm not interested in discussing here, with all the allegations of corruption, you are still okay to have him run on your team?
He needs to take the steps that he needs to clear his name.
What about the corruption?
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you for that. We're going to move on to another topic. The four of you have said that you plan to fight the federally imposed carbon tax and repeal Ontario's cap-and-trade system. Do you believe climate change is caused by human activity? And if you do, what specifically do you plan to do to cut greenhouse gas emissions? This question comes from David in Don Valley East, and Ms. Mulroney will begin with you.
Thank you, David. The carbon tax that was part of the People's Guarantee was something that evolved as a result of the grassroots process. I have said since I started my leadership bid that I oppose the carbon tax. We don't need any new tax hikes on the hardworking people of Ontario, and I stand behind that. And as Premier, I will oppose Justin Trudeau's carbon tax. Climate change is, I believe, man-made, and we need to do what we can to conserve and preserve our environment. And conservation and preservation are conservative principles. The Liberals do not have a monopoly on that. And what we need to do is we need to take the right steps. The carbon tax at $50 a ton does not get us where we need to do to actually change people's behavior. All it does is it adds a burden already to the hardworking, to the already high tax burden of hardworking Ontarians. So that is why I've opposed the carbon tax. We can go forward and preserve our environment and do what we can to take the steps to preserve that without adding to the burden.
Seeing as you have 43 minutes left on the clock, can you tell us what you would do specifically?
Yes, I'm going to work, we will work proactively with businesses and industry to work with them to take the steps that we need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We will work on developing technology with environmental innovators to make sure that we can take the necessary steps, real steps, towards making changes. And there are a lot of conservation methods like preserving our parks that we can do.
Ms. Elliott.
Yes, I do believe that climate change is largely caused by human activity, but I also believe that we don't have to tax people anymore in order to deal with it. We don't need to bring a carbon tax forward. People have been telling us across the province that they are barely able to get by between paying their hydro bills and trying to put food on the table. So there's lots of other things that we can do. First of all, I would say to Justin Trudeau, you don't tell us what to do here in Ontario, that we can develop our own solutions. And so I would want to join with Jason Kenney in Alberta, with Scott Moe in Saskatchewan, and with Andrew Scheer, our federal leader, to say, stop, we will decide what's best for Ontario. You don't get to tell us. But we can also be environmentally responsible without imposing a tax. What I would propose that we do is work with our green energy technology, work with businesses across the province, perhaps give them some incentives to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, and then work internationally as well, because we know that they're opening a new coal-fired plant like once a week in China. So it's not just what we can do in Ontario or Canada, it's what we can help to do internationally as well. So that's what I would propose to do.
Mr. Ford.
Well, I'm glad my opponents agreed with me when I first brought it out. Because I can tell you right now, my friends, if Doug Ford didn't come out on the last debate and bring them along kicking and screaming about the carbon tax, they'd still have a carbon tax. Very simple. The carbon tax is a terrible tax. It's a terrible tax for the people of this province. It's a job killer, absolute job killer to companies around Ontario, right across this country. We're trying to compete worldwide with our hands tied behind our back. Right now, we have a company closing called Campbell Soup down in Etobicoke. 100 years. 100 years they've been in business. And when we had to talk to the people at Campbell Soup, do you know what they said? They said, how can we compete when you have the highest hydro rates in North America, highest property taxes, highest water rates, and then you try to burden us with a carbon tax? That's unacceptable. We're looking at south of the border.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. I'm sorry, you're out of time. Mrs. Granic, Allen, I'll remind you the question is, do you believe climate change is man-made? And if so, what do you plan to do about it?
So thank you for that reminder. I do believe climate change exists. Obviously, new measurements and new methods of research are coming across all the time that actually measure the amount of contribution that man does contribute to climate change. So that's still being measured. With respect to the carbon tax, as you asked, I did not develop my position because I joined the race for leader for Ontario PC Party. I knew right from my gut, the moment I heard Patrick Brown develop that policy in his own way, because he did not consult with the grassroots members of this party to come out with policy. He did not. I knew, unlike these three candidates, that it was wrong. It was wrong to bring in that policy, and I will fight it tooth and nail. And trust me when I say that, I will. We're going to stand with our cousins in Ottawa, with Andrew Scheer and our Conservatives, and back them up for once, and say, no, Justin Trudeau, your carbon tax is not welcome here. And I will fight it in court as necessary, because I have the grounds to do so. And if Justin Trudeau somehow still forces me, I will take the existing gas tax, change its name to carbon, and that will be the carbon tax. But no new taxes, no increase in taxes.
Thank you. So what would the four of you do if the Prime Minister decides to impose a tax in Ontario and just rebate Ontarians directly?
Well, I'd take him to the Supreme Court, along with our friend Jason Kenney, Premier Mo, and any other Premier. Again, this is a job killer. This is bad for the people. He just doesn't get it. Do you know why he doesn't get it? He's never run a business. He's never worked in a factory. He's never had to meet a payroll or look at a P&L statement. So what he's doing is making sure that every company in the country is an unfair playing field. We're trying to compete against the Americans. You see what's happening down in the U.S.? Lowest unemployment. Lowest unemployment in 20 years. Trillions of dollars are coming back into the country. Manufacturing jobs are coming back. And you look at Ontario, we lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs. And when you come up here, you got to go through the red tape, bureaucracy, carbon tax, every tax you can possibly think. How do we attract businesses? When I'm Premier, I'm going to make sure we go down to the border, big sign, neon sign, Ontario is open for business. We're going to make this the most prosperous region anywhere in North America. I'm going to give businesses incentives and cut taxes, make sure they create jobs, not a job killer. That's a job killer, a carbon tax.
I would also question the constitutionality of the legislation and the rules that Justin Trudeau is bringing forward. We can't stand for that in Ontario. We need to stand up for Ontario and our rights. They can't move into what is properly Ontario's territory. And I also want to say that I have been opposed to a carbon tax since I was first elected in 2006. So this has been a long-standing issue for me. I have never stood in favor of a carbon tax for many, many years, long before this leadership campaign.
Althea, the role and the job of the Premier of Ontario is to represent the people of Ontario. And just because Justin Trudeau and the federal Liberals have decided that this is the way they want to proceed does not mean that we have to take it. And so the Premier needs to do everything she can do to oppose that. And so that means looking at all options that are available to us, all legal options. We can occupy the field by making sure that we can prove that we can meet those standards that they're asking for. But regardless of whether we do or not, it is the job of the Premier of Ontario to make sure that we do what's right, and that means no carbon tax, no new taxes.
Again, all very good words, and I'm glad we've all evolved our positions. But Christine, where were you when Patrick Brown was trampling on the grassroots through our policy process, when he just came up with this policy on his own? Why didn't you speak out then? We need strong voices if we're going to take down the Win Liberals. After all this year of corruption, of everything these Liberals have done to our economy, we need to bolster our economy, and we need to have a strong voice to do so. So please, let's stand strong. Let's go with the trusted voice who has been outspoken on these issues, who's consulted with the grassroots, who doesn't trample on the grassroots of our own party.
Okay. Next question, similar vein. Many party members wrote in with a version of this question, including Norma from Ottawa Orleans and a young progressive conservative named Jordan from Burlington, who worries about Ontario's massive debt and the cost of servicing that debt forecast to be more than $12 billion this year. Okay, here's the question. If you get rid of cap and trade and the federal carbon tax revenue, which you've all pledged to do and repeated here, you have $8.7 billion less to spend. Your budget plans, including any promises to balance the budget quickly, require active cuts over a sustained period of time. The Win Liberals did two big things they didn't campaign on. They brought in cap and trade, and they sold off parts of Hydro One. You've all said you plan to do a value for money audit to find waste. Give me two specific examples of areas where you'd look to cut. And we begin with Mrs. Granic.
Thank you. So let's just be very clear here in Ontario. We don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. So we don't need to tax Ontarians anymore. We just need to manage our budget properly. I will balance our budget, and here's where we're going to work. We're going to prioritize our spending. We know the main basics that Ontarians require and want us to fund. Infrastructure, health care, those are funding priorities. We don't need to fund all these special interest small programs that actually do cost quite a bit. So my platform, as I said, doesn't include any new taxes or any raise in taxes. We don't need to be burdened by these things. So one specific example, and I mentioned this last week, is are you aware that we give $14,000 to people who buy $140,000 Teslas? That's a ridiculous rebate to be giving Ontarians. We do not need to be paying for these boutique tax cuts. We also have to understand that we have a problem with corporate welfare, and it's important that we reduce that and eliminate that. So giving away money to companies is not something I'm interested in. I'm interested in making sure Ontarians can keep as much money in their wallets as possible.
Could you give us an example, or maybe two, of some of those business subsidies that you would look to trim?
Well, the one I mentioned obviously was the personal one, was the Tesla one. That's one example. And I mentioned debt reduction is important, so we can reduce how much interest we pay. Right now we're paying approximately $12 billion on interest, so we need to pay that off as soon as possible, so that way we won't be required to pay as much servicing that debt.
But with respect, $14,000 on Tesla tax credits is not going to help solve billions of dollars.
There are a lot of climate change subsidies we can go through. There are a lot of climate change subsidies. So I would be interested in reviewing those and repealing as many as possible.
Ms. Mulroney.
Well, Althea, the reason I'm running is because Kathleen Wynne was mortgaging my children's future, and I needed to do something about it. Politicians have to remember that they're spending your money, not theirs. And that's the Liberals have created a culture of waste over the last 15 years, and it's time for it to stop. Kathleen Wynne has been fighting against the provincial auditor for years instead of working with her to find ways to reduce waste. And from Canada Goose jackets to car washes on the smaller side to billions of dollars in corporate welfare without requiring the jobs stay and the investments stay in Ontario. Most recently, and this is something that was just shocking, was that the government was spending millions of dollars, doubled their advertising budget and most of the money was going to Liberal friends and insiders. So this culture of waste and spending needs to stop. We can do better, and that's why a PC government needs to come into place, because that's what Ontario taxpayers expect us to do.
Ms. Elliott.
Well, one of the reasons why I entered this leadership campaign was because of the huge debt that this government is carrying and keeps adding to it with really no care about the effect it's going to have on our children and grandchildren. At $311 billion right now and growing by the day, $12 billion a year in payments. It's the third largest expenditure after health care and education. What it means is that our children and grandchildren are not going to have the same standard of living that we have. They're not going to be able to buy their own homes. And I think it's irresponsible to continue to accumulate debt like that. The Wynne Liberals like to say that they're fair, they're being even-handed and so on, but there's nothing even-handed about leaving that debt to our children. So I think two of the areas you asked us to point out where we would deal with cutting waste and finding savings, Green Energy Act, I would start with that. We would repeal the Green Energy Act, stop these multi-million-dollar FIT contracts for value way over the price of the power and what it's worth, and the fact that we're having to pay other jurisdictions to take power off our hands. That would be a great place to start. That could find us a lot of savings.
Mr. Ford.
Well, I'm the only one that's ever saved the taxpayers' money. Out of all my opponents here, I've actually done it. I was down at City Hall, the 5th largest budget in the country. We saved over $1 billion to the taxpayers on a $12 billion overall budget. I know how to go through the budget line item by line item. I was on the budget committee longer than any other councillor at the city. And I'll answer your question about how we're going to save money. Do you know that we're actually paying California for credits $469 million of your hard-earned tax dollars? $469 million were given to Quebec, but majority to California. That is done. The party's over with the taxpayers' money. We're going to start holding people accountable. We'll go line item by line item in every single ministry. We'll start driving efficiencies, finding efficiencies, and we're going to save billions of dollars. I ask my friends out there watching tonight, we have a $141 billion budget. Do you think we can find 4 cents on the dollar in the government and $141 billion? I've been across the province, and every place I've gone, they break out laughing, and they say we should be able to save more.
You can talk more in the open debate part. I'm sorry. Just to make it fair for everybody else. Let me kick it off. In the last election, the PC party campaigned to cut 100,000 public sector jobs. So it's one thing to say you're going to cut waste, but if you're honest with Ontarians, how, when, where...
I didn't hear the first part.
In the last election, the Ontario PC party campaigned on cutting 100,000 public sector jobs.
That's right.
So to those people at home where you're wondering what you would cut when you do your value for money audit, what are some of these examples that you would cut?
Well, you know something, I'll answer that question, because when we saved $1 billion, not one single person lost their job. Not one single person lost their job. So what we are going to do, we're going to do best practices, and we're going to have lean systems. I don't think the government even understands Lean Six Sigma. We practice Lean Six Sigma at our company. We're going to make sure we drive efficiencies through technology, through best practices, through lean systems. And you ask any black belt in Lean Six Sigma, if they can find 4% on the government, they'll laugh at you. They will absolutely laugh at you. There's so much waste in all departments. You could sneeze and find billions of dollars at the province. Absolutely sneeze. You know, the party with the taxpayers' money is over. They can pack their loot bags up and they're all going, because we're going to sanitize Queen's Park from top to bottom. Queen's Park is politically corrupt from top to bottom.
I'm glad Doug wants to sanitize Queen's Park, but we really need to get rid of all the damage that the McGuinty-Wynne Liberals have done. And I'm going to give you a concrete example. You want another example? Here's one. Wind turbines. I pledge that if I'm leader, I'm going to take those wind turbines, I'm going to rip them right out of the ground.
Beautiful.
And here's why. Because families in Ontario are burdened by the cost that we're giving to these companies who generate electricity we don't need, that we sell at a loss to Americans, our friends south of the border.
That's right.
That's ridiculous. So those wind turbines will be gone. And we have it within our purview to do so, and I'll make sure that we set the parameters properly because we have the constitutional ability to do so. So those wind turbines, gone.
With all due respect to you, Doug, it's not as simple as saying you're going to save 4 cents or 6 cents or whatever it is on the dollar. What you need to do is spend the time and go through line by line by line to do a value for money audit. And the value, I think taxpayers of Ontario would expect that if there is no value in those programs, and I expect we could find a lot, then we should get rid of them and use them for the programs that we have in our platform. But it's not just a simple thing of saying to the various ministries, go find 4 cents or 6 cents on the dollar. What you need to do is roll up your sleeves and do the job yourself. As to Tanya, you can't just rip wind turbines out of the ground. There are a lot of people who have negotiated their own contracts. They've negotiated huge loans with the bank. They have contracts that they expect are going to be honored. We can't do that. We can go through the big contracts that are there and try and find ways if we can terminate them early, but we cannot rip up contracts.
Yes,
how are we ever going to get people to invest in Ontario if we don't respect contracts?
Christine,
no business
you're a
will
lawyer.
even come here.
You're a lawyer.
I am a lawyer, and I know you can't do that.
No, you're a lawyer. We can pay out. We can, for those rural the rural landowners who own the land in which they're leasing it. We can pay them. Fine, we'll pay them to the end of their contracts, but not to the corporations who are taking Ontarians' hard-earned tax dollars, who are taking their money from families who don't have enough money to put food on their table, that are jacking our hydro rates to subsidize power going to Americans. That is not true.
You're suggesting we should just rip up contracts. Now,
I'm going to rip the wind turbines out of the ground.
They're going to come to Ontario. If that's what you say. That's what you say. Nobody will come to Ontario.
We're going to move on to health care.
Hey.
As you know, the healthcare sector faces a lot of pressure from an aging population. It is the largest part of the provincial budget. This question is from a registered nurse named Natalia in Mississauga Centre. What is the first issue in healthcare that you would address? And Greg and Pembroke would like to know, where would you get the money to do so? And would you support a raise or a freeze to wages? Mr. Ford, we begin with you.
Well, I'm glad you talked about the healthcare system. I call it hallway healthcare. As I've said across the province, when I've been crisscrossing the province, my mother got wheeled into the hospital a few weeks ago, and she was in the hallways, stacked up like the cars on the 401. I had a conversation with the EMS people, I had a conversation with the nurses and the doctors, and they told me a very simple story. They aren't being listened to. They are not being listened to. They're under full attack by this Liberal government. Well, I have a message. I have a message, a clear message for the doctors and nurses. Help is on its way. We're going to make sure resources will be on its way, and we're going to listen. We're going to have to use technology similar to Humber River Hospital, the first digital hospital in North America, the shortest wait times, and the shortest wait times in a quick hospital in Ontario is 4 hours. That's unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable. Our budget for healthcare is 38.7% of the overall budget. It's roughly $51.8 million. And when I talk to the doctors, they're doing a great job, and I have a soft spot for nurses. They're telling me, listen to us. We understand how to find efficiencies. It's not always about throwing money at a problem, because money doesn't solve problems all the time, as much as a lot of politicians think it is. It doesn't. You got to listen to the frontline people. That's how you find savings. You listen to the nurses. You listen to the doctors. It's very simple. Making sure that you listen to the frontline workers will find efficiencies and will deliver better service.
So is wait time your number one issue? That's the one thing
I think it's absolutely huge. We live in Ontario. EMS can't keep up. So what's happening? The EMS people are coming in, they're staying with the patients. We need nurses to take over from the EMS people to get them back on the road. They couldn't keep up. The demand is overwhelming. But that's one example of running things more efficiently.
Okay. Mrs. Granic-Allen.
While I was raised in Toronto, I now have the unique privilege of among these candidates of living in a rural community in Ontario. So I understand intimately what it's like to not have a GP that you could in your local area, what it's like to have to commute maybe 45 minutes, almost 2 hours sometimes just to see a specialist. And I appreciate that. So I think we need to ask ourselves, how are we delivering healthcare to people who need it most? I don't believe that we should cut healthcare funding. I know it's approximately half of our budget goes to healthcare, and we only know that figure is going to grow because we have an aging population. But I believe we need to give services to Ontarians when they need it most, and healthcare is one of those services that we know Ontarians expect us to deliver. So I think we need to look at, yes, like Doug said, improving wait times 100%. Are there efficiencies to be made? Yes. Is there ways that we can find out more funding? Yes. For example, I would renegotiate the drug prices with pharma companies. Why are they gouging us? That's not right. And most importantly, we need to make sure those in rural communities are accessing health care when they need it.
Thank you. Ms. Mulroney.
Althea, I think all of us here have sat a long time in a waiting room or waited a long time for surgery or an MRI. There are significant deficits in our healthcare system. And it would be, I think, impossible to pick one thing that we need to do. There are so many things that we need to address. But what we need to do is we need to work with our doctors and our nurses and our frontline workers to work with them to start addressing the chronic overcapacity problem that we have, to start reducing wait times and make sure we are providing adequate emergency room care. We also need to invest in the rest of our healthcare system, our long-term care. We need to have enough beds to take the pressure off our hospitals today. We are spending, there are people who are in beds today that need to be moved to rehab facilities or long-term care, and they're putting pressure on our hospitals now. So we need to look at the entire system and make investments and make changes along the way, but we really need to work with our frontline workers to do that, create new long-term care beds, and invest in technology to make sure that we're taking pressure off our system.
Thank you. Ms. Elliott.
Well, thanks, Cynthia. I've had the great privilege of working for the last 2 years as Ontario's first patient ombudsman, working exclusively in the area of healthcare. And though we are putting a lot of money into healthcare, study after international study indicates that we aren't getting the best value for the money that we're putting in. So where we are moving is transitioning from a system of healthcare that's primarily provider-centered to one that's truly patient-centered. So we need to listen to what patients actually want, what they want to have delivered, and have patients involved in every aspect of the organization's operations. So for a hospital, for example, you would have patients involved on the Human Resources Committee, the Operations Committee, Finance Committee, and have them have an input into every aspect of the hospital's organization and then feed that through to quality improvement. But we also need to listen to the providers, to the physicians and the nurses. They have great ideas because they know what the problems are. But long-term care continues to be a major issue. I heard about that every day in my previous job. I would start with that to make sure our frail elderly seniors have a clean, safe, comfortable place to live.
Are there ideas like eliminating fee-for-service, things that you would consider? And I open it up to debate.
I think what we really need to do is continue to improve on our single service, our universal access to services for all Ontarians so that everyone has the opportunity to receive excellent quality healthcare services. So what I would want to do is concentrate on improving our system. There are big gaps. The service in the north is very difficult to access because of the geographic distribution. Long-term care and home care is very hard to find. The same thing happens in many rural parts of Ontario. What we really need to do is strengthen our existing system. That's what I would want to work on.
When I was in Peterborough last week talking to a lot of people, there's 7,000 residents in Peterborough that don't have a physician. And I'm sure that's across the rural areas. We're going to give doctors incentives to go to rural areas. If I have to go and build them a little medical building and give them a tax break to move in a rural area to serve the people up there, that's what we're going to do. Because it's unacceptable in Ontario, Peterborough, a little over an hour from Toronto, there's 7,000 people without a physician. That's unacceptable. So we're going to make sure we provide services for the people in the north that aren't getting the services.
So I am one of those people 2 hours from Toronto, and I understand firsthand about the services or the lack thereof, and we need to meet the patient's needs where they are. One other area that we have to discuss, though, is we need to be attracting doctors to Ontario and healthcare workers and nurses. And how are we doing that if the Wynne government is trampling on the conscience rights of healthcare workers? We need to protect the freedom of conscience, especially amongst the frontline delivery of healthcare workers. So this is something that's very important and very dear to me. And I think if we have respect for conscience rights for doctors, then we will increase the attraction for doctors and nurses and personal support workers to come to Ontario.
We have hundreds of thousands of new people in Ontario, and we don't have enough doctors to take care of them. And instead of working with doctors and nurses, this government, this Liberal government, has been fighting with them. Doctors are running campaigns to market themselves as the good healthcare providers that they are. We need to be encouraging our doctors to stay in the communities that they love, where they're serving smaller rural areas. We need to work with them cooperatively so that we can make sure that we are taking pressure off our emergency rooms and our wait rooms. They are the ones that are providing care to all of us, and instead of fighting with them, we need to be working with them.
I would certainly respect the conscience rights of physicians as well as healthcare organizations, hospitals, and palliative care facilities that don't want to provide medical assistance in dying, for example. I respect their rights to make their own decisions about that. But I also am really disturbed by the Wynne government's insistence on picking a fight with doctors. I don't know why they're doing that. If you want to create a patient-centered system, you need to have everybody that provides care involved in that conversation.
Thank you. I'm sure we can pick this up on continue the conversation. This question is from Daryl in Muskoka. How would a PC government you lead deal with exorbitant hydro rates? Ms. Elliott, we begin with you.
It's hard to know where to start with that one because we absolutely need to. We know that people are really struggling with hydro rates. They've tripled for the average residential consumer since the Liberals took power in 2003. And a lot of people are finding it really hard to cope, particularly in northern areas. So what we need to do, first of all, is start with the Green Energy Act. We would repeal that. We would give local municipalities the power to decide whether they want to have wind turbines in their areas or not. We would also end these huge multi-million-dollar contracts to supply wind power at a value far higher than the value of the power. We need to take a look at the executive's compensation. The chief executive at OPG is making over $4 million a year, while the counterpart in Quebec is about $500,000. There's something wrong with that equation, and that needs to change. And we also need to take a look at removing things from residential consumers' bills that don't need to be there, things like the conservation program cost and so on. Finally, we also need to look at the dividends that are coming back from the sale of the Hydro One shares and apply all of those dividends to reduce consumers' contracts as well. So there's a lot of things we can do. We have pledged to reduce hydro rates by 12%, but I think we need to do a lot more than that because people are really suffering out there.
Mr. Ford.
Well, the Green Energy Act is just a scam, in my opinion. Absolute scam. You know, and you look at, I'll give you an example, my friends. I was up in Bella. They're trying to make the falls, right? They're turning that into a little hydro plant, and they aren't even going to be using the hydro. It's going to be going basically in the garbage. So what I see is you have all these bankers and all the investment companies making billions of dollars. For instance, charging 90 cents for a product when it should be 10 cents, lining their pockets. As I was talking to an energy critic, he's saying, Doug, you're in the printing industry. Wouldn't you love to have a monopoly, charge what you want, and throw your printing in the garbage after? That's what's happening. It's not millions of dollars, it's billions of dollars. It's an absolute scam that they're doing. That's done. That is absolutely done. And as for other energy policies, I wanted to mention about my cap and trade policy. My cap-and-trade policy is
I'm sorry,
very
Mr.
simple.
Ford, you are
Can I
out of
finish
time.
the cap-and-trade?
I'm sorry. We know you're
basically-
opposed to it.
I'm going to cap taxes
Mr.
and trade
Ford.
Kathleen Wynne.
Yes.
That's my cap-and-trade policy.
Mrs. Granic Allen.
Okay. Thanks for giving time to get that zinger in. It was a good one. Regarding hydro rates, we know they've doubled under the McGuinty-Wynne Liberals. It's been a disaster. Families are burdened. They can no longer afford it. So getting back to what Christine and I were chatting about a few minutes ago, we're going to get rid of the wind turbines. We're going to rip them up. And Christine, I'm going to explain to you how. We have, Ontario has legislative supremacy. We have it within our jurisdiction and our powers to actually cancel those contracts. And while you may favor giving money to corporations and burdening Ontarians with those taxes, with those high hydro rates, I actually do not. And if you don't believe me with my research, then go speak to Professor Pardee at Queen's University, who wrote a detailed report for the Fraser Institute on how we are permitted to cancel that contract. I'm from the rural area. I come from Great County. Folks in the cities don't understand wind turbines. I do, because I see at least 50 of them when I drive home. It's a lot, and we cannot burden Ontarians anymore. And guess what? In the rural county, we pay more. When you're on a farm, you pay more because you need electricity to heat your barn or to put lights on in all your outbuildings. We have high hydro rates. We simply cannot afford it. Wind turbines are getting ripped out. We're done with that.
Thank you very much. Ms. Mulroney.
Well, of all the things that the Liberals have done to harm the province of Ontario, the mess that they've made of our electricity system ranks at the top. And we don't need to talk about the fact that they've tripled. Everyone knows that. Every time you open your hydro bill, you know what they've done. It is a burden on homeowners, it's a burden on families, and it's a burden on businesses that are chasing our businesses away. So I have a plan, which is to lower electricity rates by 12% for homeowners, to scrap the Green Energy Act, and to start looking at getting out of these expensive contracts where we can do so. We were able to get out of the Samsung deal. It cost us $5 billion, and the Liberals decided to stay in it because, I don't know why, but they decided to stay in it, and they had the option to cancel it when they tripped a clause. And so it can make financial sense to do so. We need to do that. We need to get politics out of energy policy. We need to do what's right and fix this mess.
So do you all agree then, and I'm going to throw another question here from another party member, which is, would any of you consider buying back a majority share in Hydro One?
I think the people of Ontario are tired of government playing politics with this. I think that we're just going to focus on trying to get hydro bills under control for ratepayers and look at how we can fix the structural mess that they've made with these long-term contracts. The sale of Hydro One is something that they've bungled, but it's not something that I would touch at this time.
I think what's done is mostly done, although it might be worthwhile trying to get back a controlling interest. I think that would be helpful. But I would also like to just respond to what Tanya said earlier about canceling all of these contracts. We may have a legitimate reason to do so legally, but why would we do that? Because it would cost us a fortune to get out of those contracts, and it would send a very bad message to any other businesses that are looking to locate in Ontario if we can, at the whim of a government, just rip up a contract. We need to make sure that Ontario is seen as a good place to do business, and we cannot do that by ripping up contracts. But what I would say we should do is we should take a look at all of those big contracts and see if there are any legitimate legal reasons where we could either terminate them, or if they are to be advancing in various stages, not to proceed with the next stage. We need to do that work. We need to find whatever savings we can for Ontario taxpayers.
I'd like to speak to that, please. Christine, you asked me why I would do it? Because Ontario families need it. We cannot afford this. Just because Kathleen Wynne and Dalton McGuinty came up with this crazy scheme doesn't mean that us as Ontario PC party members have to buy into it. So it says no. And regarding the legislative supremacy we have, guess what? Within that clause, we get to actually determine any compensation to these companies, if any. So we get to decide. And I think that we need to stop this. We need to stop this right now and put Ontarians and the grassroots Conservatives first. And I don't like the talk I'm hearing here. I don't like it. Families need relief.
It doesn't matter what you like or not, Tanya. The fact remains that if we rip up these contracts, we're going to have to pay a lot in damages, which may be worth more than the contracts are actually worth themselves. So I think you have to think a little bit more seriously about this before you willfully agree to rip up contracts.
Read the Fraser Institute report. It outlines it very lovely by a law professor named Professor Party.
There are no easy solutions to this. It took years to get us into this mess, and we're going to have to look at all of these contracts. Some contracts are in early precondition modes where you can actually get out of them. We've got to look at each one to see if we can get out of them. And there are other major ones that we have to look at to see if the risk of getting out of them exceeds the benefit of getting out of it. But we need to do that. Ontarians deserve it, but we cannot suggest that it's going to be easy because people are tired of that. There are no easy solutions to the mess that the Liberals have created for us.
Thank you. Many party members wrote in with a version of this next question. There seems to be a growing movement to eliminate the Catholic school boards in French and English and move towards a singular secular school system in both official languages. Is this something you would consider doing as a way of cutting costs? Ms. Mulroney, we'll begin with you.
I do not plan on looking at the school board issue. It has worked well. It is constitutionally mandated, and at this time, I would not proceed in that. What we do need to do is encourage allow independent schools to grow. We need to make sure that we are funding the francophone languages, francophone schools in this province, and doing what they need to ensure that the language flourishes and that they are being taught in the language that they wish. But in terms of the Catholic School Board, I would not intend to do that.
Ms. Elliott?
My simple answer is no. I would not make any move in that respect, although I think that there are things that we can do to reduce some of the costs in having the two boards, having joint busing, for example, perhaps some administrative services, but that would be as far as I would want to go. I remember very clearly running in the 2007 election where that was a major issue that we heard very clearly from the people of Ontario that they don't want us to change what's already there.
Mr. Ford.
No, I wouldn't, but there's a lot of savings within the school board. You look years ago, does everyone remember when Kathleen Wynne was down there? And she bankrupted the Toronto School Board, and the province had to come in and pick up the pieces. Yeah, have you ever went down Highway 10 where there's the Peel public system and then the separate system, two Taj Mahals right beside each other? Why can't they have one Taj Mahal instead of two Taj Mahals? Or no Taj Mahals?
That's what I'm asking you.
The answer is no. I wouldn't change it, but I'd sure drive efficiencies. When I'm premier, these guys are going to wake up real quick. Real quick, I'll tell you.
Okay. Ms. Granic-Allen.
Thank you. The number one reason, or the number one factor we need to consider anytime we think of education is what do the parents want? We need to always factor in parental choice. So right now, parents do enjoy the choice of sending their child to a Catholic or English or Francophone school in both those options, and by all means. And as long as parents, we need to think about how can we expand parental choice in education? How can we offer more options to parents so that their child's needs are being met? And I can tell you how one way where we did not offer options to parents is with the sexual education. There, I said it. And Patrick Brown also trampled on parental rights by not offering choice to parents in sexual education. And I know some of my fellow candidates have evolved the position. So I'd like to ask you right now, Christine. I know you said you were looking to review perhaps the Kathleen Wynne sex ed. Would you be open to giving parental rights parents notification in advance of those lessons so that they have the option to withdraw their children? Would you be committing to that?
We've entered the open debate, so feel
all
free
right,
to
then
debate.
I'll get right into it. I think I've said my position has been the same for several years, which is that parents were not consulted by the Kathleen Wynne government before they brought in these sex education guidelines. I want to open up the guidelines, speak to parents across the province to understand what their concerns are and make changes where changes are necessary based on the parents' rights. Parents know what their children should learn and when. And mostly what I've heard about so far is the age appropriateness of some of the things that children are learning. Perhaps they're learning certain things in grades 2 or 3 that they maybe shouldn't learn until high school. The other thing that I've heard from a lot of people is that their guidelines, it's not a set curriculum, and that individual teachers are interpreting the guidelines and teaching things according to their view of the world. It should not be that. It should be the parents instructing them as to what children should learn and when. We need to make the changes, and we need to listen to parents.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And regarding that, just one follow-up. So regarding the when, parents can't know when unless they get advance notification for those lessons. So would you or anybody else on the stage, would you commit to giving advance notice of when these contentious materials will be discussed so that parents can exercise that choice that you so eloquently spoke of?
Well, if I could just finish the answer then, yes, of course I would. People used to be able to do that. If they can't now, absolutely they should know when these things are being taught, and they should have the right for their child not to be in that class if they don't want them to.
Thank you. I applaud Christine. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You know, Christine, we've known each other for a long time. And as I've been traveling around, people want to know which Christine they're going to get. Are they going to get the Christine that was for sex ed? Or are they going to get the Christine that's against sex ed? Are they going to get the Christine that was maybe for the carbon tax? Or are they going to get the Christine that's maybe against the carbon tax? Or are they going to get the Christine that wants to replace Kathleen Wynne? Or are we going to get the Christine that took a $220,000 job, a political appointment, from Kathleen Wynne? Which one is it?
Well, I've been very clear, Tanya, that I would not reopen the sex ed curriculum. Turns out my children learned more about sex from the TVO debate than they have in school.
Then clearly you haven't read the curriculum.
But I will be clear that although we may not agree on every issue, you will know where I stand. And I understand that you've been disappointed and feel betrayed by other leaders in the party and also leadership contenders who have changed their views. You will always know where I stand on these issues.
I would, so if I may, I'd like to respond to Doug's comments on a couple of points. First of all, Doug, I have always had the same position on sex education. I said the same thing in 2015. I absolutely did. Don't make up stories, Doug. Come on.
I'm not making up stories.
You can check my record. My record says that I had the same view in 2015 as I have now. On the issue of carbon tax, I've been against carbon tax, as I said earlier, since I was elected in 2006. On the issue of my job as patient ombudsman, I want everybody here to know that I was chosen for this job out of an independent panel of people not associated with the government, and I was given that job over several hundred people. I am very proud to have served as patient ombudsman, and I don't have anything to apologize to you for.
Did you not get a call? Did you not get a call from the Minister of Health? Did you not get a call from Minister of Health regarding your job?
The decision for me to become the patient ombudsman was made by an independent panel of people. You may have heard some of them have responded on Twitter and other mechanisms. I was chosen by an independent group who recommended several candidates to the minister. The minister called me to tell me what the panel had chosen, not the minister. Okay. Just to be clear.
Insider.
Thank you very much.
Insider.
I think not, Doug.
Ontario's economy has generally posted impressive job growth numbers, except for last month. The vast majority of jobs, though, are being created in Toronto and in the GTA. This question comes from Jack in Nipissing. What would you do to encourage job growth in areas outside the GTA, especially youth employment opportunities, to prevent the hollowing out of rural areas and smaller communities? Mrs. Granic, we begin with you.
Thank you very much. Obviously, Ontario is and hopefully will continue to be the economic engine of this country, and I'm very proud of that. And despite all the attacks Kathleen Wynne and the McGuinty Liberals have thrown at our economy, it is still somewhat robust. We need to stop throwing things at our economy. We need to stop we need to stop hampering our economy by throwing things at it, by trying to slow it down with high hydro rates. That's why I said we're going to take the windmills down, because we need to bring those rates down so that we can say we're open for business in Ontario, that businesses can come back. When they see the high hydro rates or the cost of doing business in Ontario, they get scared. When we bring jobs back, that will encourage more investment in this province. And most importantly, though, you know, I'm not into making policy on the fly. I'm into consulting with the grassroots members of our party, which for some reason the last 3 years is a novel idea. So we need to bring back local democracy and ask people in the rural communities. I'm not going to say here, and I know what Sudbury needs or what Eastern Ontario needs. We're going to consult with the local members of provincial parliament, consult with the local municipalities, and ask them, how can we best invest in your community so that we bring jobs back? We're going to listen to the grassroots. I'll tell you what we won't do, though, and this is a pivot. What we won't do is we're not going to be handpicking and bullying candidates out of running in nomination races to be our candidates. We're going to get authentic candidates. Because as Ontario PC Party members, we believe in open, public, fair, and democratic nominations. So let me talk about this. We're going to reopen the nominations that have been contentious. I'm saying that right now. We cannot stand here, and a lot of them have been in the rural areas where we need honest input for what those local areas do need. So we're going to open that up. We're going to open up those nominations, and I hope that my colleagues here on the stage will encourage to do so as well.
Thank you, Ms. Mulroney. I remind you the question is about how to bring employment opportunities to rural and smaller communities.
Well, thank you. I have met, as I've been traveling the province during this race, I have met business owners across Ontario. And most recently, I was in Northern Ontario. And I can tell you that all they want is to be listened to. Each region is distinct and has their own challenges. But the people who live there love their communities and want to continue to live there and work there. What we need to do is make sure that we have a leader who understands how to work with businesses. What we've had for the last 15 years is a government who has been fighting businesses, whether it's through increasing taxes and fees, increasing hydro rates, doubling red tape. I mean, it does not stop. And businesses feel like they can no longer do what they got started to do, which is get into business and create economic opportunity. I will attract jobs into Ontario and make sure that those who want to work and live in certain rural communities are able to do that. But what we need to do is we need to listen to our local leaders, our local MPPs, the people who are in the north, who are in Eastern Ontario, across this province, and talk to them about the challenge they're facing so that we can let their voices come to the top and that we can have our policies reflect what they want.
Thank you. Ms. Elliott.
Well, as I've traveled around the province during this leadership campaign, I've heard the same thing from business owners. They really feel that they're under attack by the Win Liberals, that they really want them to move out of the province or close up their businesses. And in the north particularly, there's almost a sense of despair. They're worried about keeping the jobs that they already have. There's a concern about keeping Bombardier there, for example, and opening up the Ring of Fire. That is something that I heard repeatedly by people in the north. It's a huge proposition, a $60 billion project, bringing 5,500 jobs to both Northern Ontario and Southern Ontario. So we need to listen to people where they live, but we also need to get hydro rates under control. A lot of businesses, if they're looking at a manufacturing facility, don't want to look at Ontario now. We need to ease some of the restrictions on businesses, particularly those brought forward by Bill 148. And the other piece that I think we really need to look at is innovation. We haven't talked about that much. We need to bring that entrepreneurial spirit back to Ontario, get people to be able to bring their businesses to market themselves, create jobs for themselves, and create jobs for other people. That's, I believe, the future of Ontario with a well-educated workforce.
Thank you, Mr. Ford.
I'm the only one that understands how to operate a business. I have a division in the U.S., one in Canada. I get letters every single week from states all over the U.S. saying, come down to Texas, we'll give you a tax incentive, we'll help you get a building as long as you employ people. Up here in Ontario, we're going to get rid of all the red tape and bureaucracy that makes it almost impossible to open the businesses here. We're going to get rid of the carbon tax until that's not a burden onto the companies. We're going to give companies tax incentives to come up and open up here in Ontario. And don't mistake tax incentives from corporate welfare. I am dead against corporate welfare, absolutely dead against it. But we have to make sure we have an environment to create businesses. I always say the government doesn't create businesses, they create the environment to create businesses. I'm the only one that's ever created numerous jobs on both sides of the border, and I'll do that for people not only in the GTA in Toronto, but across the north. I just drove from last night, 4 hours from Sudbury, from North Bay. I talked to those people. I'm not going to mess around like the Liberal government. We're going to start getting those roads built. We're going to put infrastructure in until we can get a hold of all the natural resources. It's worth billions of dollars. We're going to create thousands of jobs. I will make this province the most prosperous province in the entire country, the most prosperous region in North America.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Floyd.
Thank you.
I'm going to open it up to debate, but for the dozens of people who emailed about questions about the Ring of Fire or concerns about having their children move to Toronto to get a job, are there specific things that you would like to say to them?
I would like to say that I would like young people to be able to stay in Ontario. So I've heard from so many parents that are saying their children can't find jobs here. They're going to the States, to the UK, to other places. We need to keep those young people here, whether it is in a job in an existing business or starting their own business. There's some great ideas out there. We've got really well-educated young people. They're doing great research in our universities and our hospitals. I actually believe that healthcare can stop being just a user of tax dollars and become a job creator, because there is great research being done here on the brain, for example. It's known the world over. We have places like Holland Bloorview that are creating really innovative devices for children that can't speak to be able to communicate. What they don't have is the seed money to get things started. And that's the piece that we need to get right so they can start their businesses here. They don't have to go elsewhere. They can have a good living here and they can provide a good living for other people. That's what I want to spur, because the jobs of the past, the line jobs, auto manufacturing, I grew up in Whitby, Oshawa. Most of my classmates went to work at General Motors and worked on the line. They're retired now with great pensions. I went wrong somewhere, I think. But the point is that those jobs don't exist anymore, not in the quantities that they used to. So we need to really adjust our thinking on the kind of jobs that we want young people to get into in Ontario. There's lots of jobs in innovation. There's lots of jobs in skilled labor. We don't have skilled trades here in Ontario. That's going to be a big problem for us going forward. So we really need to concentrate on those areas so people can graduate from colleges and universities with something besides a big student debt, that they'll have a job.
We need to focus on, we need to have a complete shift in the way our government interacts with business. This government has been working steadfast against business since it's been in power. People who are entrepreneurial and innovative feel like they cannot do what they want to do here. But what we need to do is we need to work as well with young people. So we need to understand what they need to, what they want. We've got the economy is changing. It's hard to keep pace. We need to work with young people and tech companies to understand what the economy is going to look like in 10 years, in 20 years, and make sure that we are training students today for the jobs of the future. Because as Christine, I agree, the economy is changing very quickly, and the kinds of jobs that existed 20 years will not exist. There's a good chance that my children and Tanya's children may not have driver's licenses. So we need to make sure that we are training children for today, kids today, for the jobs of tomorrow.
Can I just chime in here really quickly? So we have a farm. We have a farm in Grey County, and for those who don't know, it costs a lot more to live up in the rural areas. You drive a lot. Hydro rates are expensive because if you have farm and you have farming equipment, guess what? It all requires fuel or energy. So, you know, to put diesel in my tractor, that costs more. And so when we have high hydro rates and when we encourage stupidity like the cap and trade or the carbon tax, which of course everybody was supportive except for me when Patrick Brown trampled on the grassroots and brought it in, that hinders job growth in the rural communities. I get it. I live there. I understand that. So when we bring down those hydro rates and bring down costs of energy, then people can actually have that choice. Can I stay in my rural community or do I have to go to Toronto?
Thank you. On a whole other topic. This next question is from Caitlin in Ottawa, Vanier. She writes, for months, businesses, media, and politics have been rocked by the Me Too movement. The reason for this leadership process is because of the allegations of sexual misconduct. I would like to know what each of the 4 candidates will do to address the pervasive and persistent challenge of sexism and harassment in politics and within the Ontario PC Party. As leader, how will you work to ensure that this culture has no place in politics and no place in this party? Mr. Ford?
Well, it's totally, something that's totally unacceptable. I have 4 girls, my wife. It's totally unacceptable. But it's not just women. It's men too. It's on both sides. It's not just women. We have to start respecting our colleagues. No one should use their power to pressure anyone into anything. That is unacceptable. Done. It will be done.
So what would you plan to do about it as leader?
Make sure you hold people accountable. If it happens, they're gone. It's very simple. It's gone. You've got to start respecting each other. You can't use a position of power to force yourself on someone either way, if you're a male or a female. It's unacceptable.
Are there rules of conduct or certain practices that you'd put in place?
There's rules of conduct right now. They have to follow them. That's what they need to do. You got to start respecting each other. It's about respect. There's rules. There's laws in place. You got to start respecting each other. That's what it comes down to, and not abusing your power. It's very simple.
You have more time on the clock, so I'm just going to keep asking you questions.
Sorry?
The Australian Prime Minister, for example, has banned his MPs from dating their staff. Is that something that you would look at?
Suspend your staff?
Dating their staff.
No, I don't think that's appropriate. You have a staff member. Are you talking about Queen's Park? You're dating someone within Queen's Park, like in your own office? Are you serious?
No, I said the Australian Prime Minister has banned his MPs from dating their staff. Is that something you'd look at?
That's a no-brainer. You can't be dating someone in your office. If they want to date someone in Queen's Park as a whole and there's 2,000 people, that's understandable. But dating someone, your own staff? Whatever.
Okay, we move on to Ms. Granic. Alan, what would you do to ensure that culture has no place in politics and in this party?
Well, I would keep power and corruption in check. As a woman who's been actively engaged in politics for 20 years, I understand this issue very well, and I have a lot of friends who do also. I agree with Doug. We should make sure that all the laws and all the harassment laws are strictly enforced. But, you bring up, that people should leave if they've had allegations levied at them, and then we talk about due process for Patrick Brown. I'm going to ask you, where's the due process for the candidates of nominations who were bullied out of running under Patrick Brown and his corrupt teams? Where is the due process? You're all fine with Patrick Brown running for you. I'm not going to have Patrick Brown run for me. Read my lips. He's not running for me. So I would like to know, are you going to open up the nominations which are questionable, where candidates like Joe Neal in Durham, he was a regional councillor and he put his name forward to run, and he was basically bullied out of running because Patrick Brown spread a falsehood about him that he was a Liberal Party donor. So my question to you is, when Joe Neal was going to put those allegations and go to court to have an injunction made, Patrick Brown said, even if the judge sides with you, Mr. Neal, I'm still not going to sign your nomination papers because I'm going to pick Lindsay and it's not going to be you. So then after that was done,
Granic, Allen, I'm sorry.
Sorry,
it's Ms. Mulroney's turn now.
One last sentence.
You can use the open debate to ask
Okay.
all the questions you want.
We'll go back to it.
Well, the content of your original question is very serious, and it has affected thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of women across different industries, not just in politics, but in business and in the entertainment industry. And when I started my career in the business world, I saw it, and it affected my colleagues. It affected women that I worked for. The allegations that we have seen come forward, the speed at which, the number of which doesn't surprise me. It upsets me, but it doesn't surprise me. I think that women need, and men as well, who are victims of sexual assault or harassment, feel like they can come forward, and it takes a lot of courage to do that, especially in the context of a work environment. So they need to know that they can come forward, and across our industries, we need to have policies in place that support that protect them, and that manage this power differential where people take advantage of people who have less power than they do, and prey on them. Now, I did propose yesterday a sexual harassment policy for the PC party. We need to strengthen this policy in the party, and when I'm leader and when I'm premier, we will also strengthen it at Queen's Park. But it needs to happen across the board.
Ms. Elliott.
We cannot tolerate any sexual misconduct or harassment in the workplace or anywhere else. And women have gone through this for many, many years. Women are now speaking up. But particularly when someone holds a position as a boss to someone, there's no way that that can continue. I do agree with Doug. Would not happen under me either. But I think that we need to remember that we are already working on that in our policy. We already have a caucus member who is tasked with developing a workplace policy on sexual harassment and misconduct. That is going to be in place very soon, but I will certainly want to review it should I become leader, and make sure that it is adhered to. Because you can have lots of rules. We have a constitution that has not been adhered to recently either. So you have to have the rules, and you have to make sure that people follow them too.
The Federal Conservative Party here has recently added a question regarding their candidate vetting, in which they ask if an individual has ever been accused of inappropriate sexual behavior. Should that be enough to disqualify a candidate? And I open it up to debate.
Well, can I just speak to this? I think what's important to consider when we're looking at work environments and sexual harassment policies is what kind of culture and what kind of climate do we have in that workplace. And I'm telling you right now, the culture that I've seen come out of the Ontario PC offices within Queen's Park has been a toxic culture. It's one where people routinely have abused their power and position. And not just, and again, I'm not going to address the sexual allegations levied against Patrick Brown, but I'm talking about the way he has bullied, and him and his team and the executive have abused their powers, that he has given him powers that he simply does not have, that are not in the Constitution, and the way that he has run these nomination meetings in such a corrupt manner. We have to address the corruption in our party, because if you want to deal with sexual harassment, then you've got to tackle the climate. And that climate of doing what I want, how I want, when I want, it was a pervasive mentality in Queen's Park with Patrick Brown and his team, and we have to address that. And just to be clear, I was not the first to speak about it. Sorry, let me just add one more thing. I was not the first to speak about corruption in the party. Senator Marjorie Le Breton, she spoke about the corruption that happened here in Ottawa, West Nepean. Heroes like Jim Carahalios, who led the charge, and in return, what happened? He felt the wrath of Patrick Brown. So we have good people like Senator Le Breton and Jim Carahalios who've spoken out about this toxic culture of corruption. And where has that left him? Are we going to address this big elephant in the room tonight?
Open debate. Feel free to jump in.
The collective voices that have come forward as a result of what's happened at Queen's Park and what's happened in the entertainment industry and what's been happening in business and industries across Canada for years has now prompted businesses, companies to finally take a look at their policies. Not every policy is going to be the right one to address the problems in the culture in each company, but it is important that we start finally respecting the fact that this has happened and that it is having a deep effect on women and on other victims of sexual harassment, and it needs to change. But just because someone has been accused doesn't mean, I think, that it should go in, but we need to take all these allegations very seriously.
And I respect the concept of due process. I really do. And I appreciate that you all want due process for Patrick. Where is the due process for these candidates of nominations? Will you stand with me and open those nominations and say, yes,
Tanya,
we will have integrity in our open nomination process, and we will restore integrity, and we will allow due process for those candidates who are bullied out of running or who've had things levied against them that are simply not true. We must stand with Senator Le Breton and Jim Carahalios.
I understand that this issue is very, very important to you, but the question is about Me Too. I understand it's important to all of you, but the issue is about Me Too and what has happened, that women have finally come forward after years of keeping what's happened to them quiet. They have finally had the strength and the courage to do that, and it's finally transforming business culture across this province and across this country, and political culture as well, and that is important.
Okay, I'm going to cut it off here, and seeing as Ms. Granic wants to talk about the party nomination, this question is from Jamie in Oakville, North Burlington. As the new leader of the Ontario PC Party, how would you ensure that democratic principles are maintained in the party's nomination process, and how would you ensure gender equity with the candidates, MPP, and more importantly, cabinet posts? And Ms. Elliott, we'll start with you.
Well, I think the first thing that you need to do is to actually follow the Constitution. I think that's really important, to follow the rules that are set up to make sure that nomination meetings are being conducted fairly, that if you pass the initial vetting process, that you can go ahead and if you sell the most memberships, then you win. There should be no interference at all from leadership or anyone else involved in it. Everyone, once they're given the opportunity to run and given the green light, they should be able to go and sell the memberships in the proper way, and if they win the most, then they get to be the candidate. But I think that there's a lot more that we need to do to make sure. You asked about gender balance. I really believe that it's going to be the best person that should run for it. We shouldn't have quotas of women running. Yeah. I think it should be the best person, and it should be a fair and equal contest. And I think the fact that there are 3 women on this stage indicate that we get that in the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party, and that I think that the best person should win, and the person that sells the most memberships will be the winner.
Mr. Ford.
Well, we've seen in the province a lot of problems in these nominations, and we still have 20-some-odd nominations to go. And when I'm leader, I'm going to make sure they're transparent, people are held accountable, and there's going to be integrity here. I was at a nomination, Scarborough Centre. Believe it or not, the lights went out. The lights went out, and the lights came on 5 minutes later, and people running around with ballots in their hand. I was at nominations that I heard that there was ballot stuffing. There was more ballots than there was votes. I guess when they were doing it, they weren't keeping track properly. But there was more ballots. That's unacceptable. There's one thing that I won't allow to happen. We're going to vet our candidates prior to them handing over money. What just burned me up when I've been going around the province and I've heard person after person after person, Doug, I worked my back off. I sold 2,000 members. I went to the party and gave them $20,000, and they said the day before, and one person said an hour before, you can't run. That is wrong. Absolutely wrong. And that's not going to happen under my watch.
Mrs. Granic.
So that's great, but it has happened under all our watch. What have we done? What have you done, Doug? Are we okay? So this is great. No, this is a good starting point. So are we actually now? Will you commit to with me here on the stage? Will you open up all those nominations?
Any nomination that there was discretions, absolutely.
So you're going to open them up?
No, any nominations that there was discretions, that there was more ballots, lights going off, anything along those lines. That's it. They're going to be reopened up.
Great. Thank you. Anybody else want to chime in?
Ms. Mulroney, and then we'll open debate.
Well, I am disturbed to hear, Doug, that you attended nominations and saw ballot stuffing and didn't do anything about it.
No. Hold on, Caroline. Hold on.
But I'll just finish
something, Caroline.
No, I'm just following what you said.
Hold on.
Mr. Ford, we'll have open debate in a second. Please let her finish.
I am the only one on this. I'm the only one who, as part of this leadership campaign, has actually put out a plan on what we will do to restore the trust and integrity of this party. And it does include a newer and stronger vetting process for candidates, for party executive members, and for staff. And we need to make sure that our nomination procedure is as fair and open, as transparent as possible. That is key to making sure that people believe that we are the strongest party that we can be. I have confidence that the executive is doing what it can now. But when I take over the party on March 10th, I will, as I said yesterday, I have a new plan that I will implement to make sure that the party and the processes are as fair and transparent as possible.
Well, let me respond here for a minute. I'm going to start off with saying, after that, I called the leader, called the president of the party, called everyone there, told them it was unacceptable, have some integrity, have some accountability, it's unacceptable. And Caroline, I find it pretty rich for you to say this. A person that got parachuted into your area, no competition, no nomination, none whatsoever for you to say that. Matter of fact, maybe we should reopen your nomination and get more competitors in there.
can tell you I work very hard for my nomination. I look forward to finding out what kind of work you do when you actually get nominated in your riding.
Did you have a private...
Because I think it's a bit rich because a month ago you wanted to be mayor of Toronto.
Why don't you tell the people the private conversation you had with the party to get that position? That's unacceptable. That is unacceptable.
Doug, there are no private conversations. Doug, you have not even put your... I look forward to finding out where you run and when you do, but all I know is a month ago you wanted to be mayor of the City of Toronto, and when you found out this job was available, you decided that this is what you wanted to do. This party needs a leader who is actually committed to fixing what's wrong with Ontario, and I'm the only person on this stage who made the commitment last year to run as a candidate. We have so much to do, and what we need is a leader who is committed to this. That is what my priority is. Yours was running for mayor of Toronto.
And speaking, can I speak? And speaking of a month ago, Caroline, up until a month ago, you were Patrick Brown's star candidate.
That's right. That's right.
And you were happy to be his star candidate. And you sat and you said nothing while all that corruption was going on, while candidates were being bullied, while members were being stripped of their membership. So what are you going to do? Are you going to open up the nominations, or are you going to sit again quietly and say nothing as the grassroots of this party have been neglected? Will you open up the nominations?
I think what we...
I have been a very proud member of this party, working very hard to do what we need to do, which is defeat Kathleen Wynne. That is what I have been doing, along with all the other nominated candidates and caucus members. It has been a hard road, and we are doing what we need to do. I have been the one who put her name forward to be a candidate to do what we need to do with this party.
Caroline, when there was no... I did not put my name forward because I would not have been permitted to run under Patrick Brown because I'm against the sex ed curriculum.
That's right. You nailed that one. 100%.
So are you really going to sit here and lecture me on what you've done? Here's what I've done in the last 2 years. Here's what many of us have done in the last 2 years. We said stop the corruption. We've spoken out, and we've championed and said grassroots need to get on board, and we need to take back this PC party from the corrupt Patrick Brown and the executive that have run it into the ground. So you want to talk about having a voice? That's a voice. I've been very clear, very consistent. So no, I was happy not to be a star candidate under Patrick Brown.
Ms. Granic, thank you.
May I just have 1 second to say something here? I've been a proud Progressive Conservative member for over 25 years, and I'm the only one on this stage that's already served as an MPP for 9 years. And I think it's really important that we remember why we're all here. We all have to come together when this is all over, because the star target here is Kathleen Wynne, not each other.
Okay. We have 4 minutes left on the clock, so we're going to go along a little bit. I would like you now all to take a deep breath and say something nice about someone else on the stage, and then we will move to closing comments. Ms. Granic, we'll start with you.
Okay, are we ready? About each candidate, something nice?
Or you can just pick one.
Look, I'm grateful. It's a huge sacrifice to put your name forward and run for public office. It really is. So I do thank you all for the personal sacrifices, and it is, that you have done to put your name forward. I truly, from the bottom of my heart. I've experienced this in the last a couple weeks because I've been a late entrant. It's hard on families. It's hard on yourself. It's hard on your system. So I thank you for putting your name forward, and I hope that you will use your positions, even in this debate for the few minutes we have left, to help clean up our party. Because I'm a diehard grassroots conservative, and our party deserves better. We have to move on from Patrick Brown, but we can't until we treat the grassroots properly and open those nominations for those poor candidates who were just bullied out of running. It's an important point.
Can you pick one person and say something nice about them?
Sure. Sure, Christine, I'm happy of your evolved position on the sex ed. And Doug, you too. I'm happy about that very much, because I think that, no, I really am, because this is an issue. I'm the head of a parental rights stakeholder group, so I really respect that you have come this far, and I'm grateful for that. And thank you for giving parents the advance notice, because that's very important. Thank you.
Ms. Mulroney, please pick someone on the stage and say something nice about them.
I could say something nice about all three. Tanya, you are a very passionate advocate for the issue that matters to you, and you speak very well to that point. Christine, you have had a long history with the party, and you've been a great representative for your community in the past. And Doug, you speak very well for the anger that a lot of us feel about the Liberals.
Ms. Elliott.
Well, I also respect all of the candidates on this stage. I know that it takes a lot. It takes people away from their family life and from their business requirements, so I really respect everybody's doing that. To Tanya, I would say I really admire your spirit. You are very passionate about your issues. You are representing grassroots people with real concerns, and you do it very well. Caroline, I respect your getting involved in this, your knowledge, your experience in business and in volunteer causes. Volunteer causes are really important to me too, and I thank you for all the work that you're doing. And Doug, we've known each other for a really long time. I respect your power and your business experience as well, and you're doing the hard work traveling around Ontario, so thank you for that.
Mr. Ford.
Do I have an hour to say all these wonderful things? I've said over and over again, every speech I've went across the province, I have the utmost respect for my opponents here. And I'll start with Tanya. Tanya, you set a new bar here. You know, everyone the first debate, when you came out, you know, everyone after was kind of going after you. That was unfair. You have courage. You have a backbone to stand up with your beliefs. You aren't one of these wishy-washy politicians that flip side to side, which I just can't stand, these wishy-washy politicians. So thank you for standing up, and you will play an important role in our government.
Thank you.
Caroline, boy, it takes a lot of, you know, a lot of backbones, nerve to get up, because all three of us come from a family with a well-known name. And that takes a lot of courage. You have 4 children, so, you know, that it's tough. You have 4 children. You're trying to be the mom. You're trying to help out, but you're also sacrificing your whole life. You know how hard that is? I couldn't do that. I couldn't have the responsibility there and then also do what you're doing. You're going to have an amazing future in this party. Amazing future. Christine, as I've said, we've known each other for years. The charitable work you've done up in Whitby with children, with autism, with other disabilities, yourself and Jim, is unbelievable what they've given back to the community. So again, I thank you for your service. Amazing charitable work.
Okay, thank you very much, all 4 of you. And we now begin closing statements. You have up to 2 minutes to make a closing statement. And Mr. Ford, the draw made you first.
Okay. My friends, Ontario is in bad shape. It's in a financial mess right now. And once this was the economic engine of Canada, Ontario was. Now we're a have-not province under the Liberals. We've lost over 300,000 good manufacturing jobs. We've had the slowest growth of any province in the country for the past decade. We actually hold a world record. Do you know what the world record is? Is debt. A world record of debt. And the U.S. has recently taken away our competitive edge by lowering the corporate rates from 36 down to 21%. The only thing that has grown in this province is the government. Right now, we have a chance to change that. But it's going to take more than just replacing Kathleen Wynne. It's going to take electing someone who will stand up for the taxpayers and stand up to the elites, the ones that tell us they know better. And there's a lot of elites out there. Any of the candidates here can defeat Kathleen Wynne and the Liberals. The people of this province are desperate for change. The Liberals' time is up. However, we will win nothing. We will win absolutely nothing if we simply replace Kathleen Wynne Liberals with another elitist, surrounded by a team of insiders. We're just replacing the Liberals with the Liberals. Someone afraid to stand up to the special interest, afraid to stand up to the media. We win nothing if we replace one Liberal government with another Liberal government. I'm the only one who will stand up to the party elites, the political insiders, the government bureaucrats. I'm the only one who will have the courage to do what is necessary to get this province back on track.
Mr. Ford, thank you very much. I'm sorry, I've already let you run.
Are you for real?
Yes. I'm sorry. Mrs. Granic Allen, 2 minutes.
Thank you. When I entered this race, our party was still in shock at Patrick Brown's exit and the allegations against him. And 3 weeks later, it seems that as much as some things have changed, the more things seem to stay the same. I'm sorry that Patrick wasn't here with us tonight. It truly would have been justice for Patrick Brown for him to face some tough questions on this stage tonight. On behalf of party members, I would have held him into account for his political crimes as leader, his broken promises to Ontarians, to the parents on the sex ed issue, his broken promises to the taxpayers on the carbon tax issue, the corruption of the party and the party constitution in many, many nominations, his abuse of power and purging and suing Jim Karahalios, who exposed Brown's corrupt governance, a total waste of party donor money, the investigation into his financial dealings by the Integrity Commissioner, and of course the ongoing criminal investigation in Hamilton West. But Vic Fideli was right. It's time to move on from Patrick Brown. But moving on from Patrick Brown means that as a party, we need to move on without him. Make no mistake, coming out of this leadership, we must have a strong and united PC party, united in common cause to end the 15-year nightmare that has been the McGuinty-Wynne Liberal regime. A regime distinguished by its political corruption and its anti-family agenda. But our next leader, one of us, won't be able to do this if we're saddled with the toxic political baggage that comes from our previous and now infamous former leader. Starting this Friday, voting will begin. Let's vote to move on from Patrick Brown. And I'm the candidate who will do just that. I promised to move on from Patrick Brown from the beginning, for the taxpayers and the parents of children in Ontario. Let's move on from Patrick Brown, and let's defeat Kathleen Wynne in the next election. Please, vote for me, Tanya Granic Allen, as your #1 choice, and let's move on. Thank you.
Ms. Mulroney.
When we head to the polls in June, it will have been 19 years since our party has won an election. That's an entire generation. Aren't you ready to win? Aren't you ready to send Kathleen Wynne and the Liberals packing? We need so much better than the high-spending, high-taxing, job-killing policies of the Liberals. Ontario needs better. But the Ontario PC party can be the change for the better only if we make the right change at the top. A change from the past, a change from the damage of these last few weeks. There's only one candidate here who can bring that change, and that's me. I have the skills and I have the plan to attract jobs to Ontario, to make our schools a place where kids learn what they need to succeed, to protect our most vulnerable, and to make life more affordable for Ontario families. Et tout ça décolle le 10 mars.
And all of this will start up on March the 10th with a new innovative leader will be the leader of our party. We are all united to improve in Ontario.
For a new generation to take the reins, to do what past generations could not, then I ask for your support. It's time to win. Together, we can finally fire Kathleen Wynne.
Ms. Elliott.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not enough that we want to win the next election. The fact is that Ontario needs us to win the next election. We cannot afford 4 more years of the Wynne Liberals. We need to win a majority progressive Conservative government on June 7th. But here's the thing, we only have a short period of time. It's only about 100 days between now and June 7th, and we need to have a leader with experience, a leader that's ready to step into the job on day one, on March 11th, to move forward, start into full campaign mode. I am the only candidate on this stage that's prepared to do that. And I want to tell you why. I've been elected 4 times. I've served for 9 years at Queen's Park as an MPP, including 6 years as deputy leader of the party. I've traveled across this province, and I understand the needs and concerns of people in every part of this province. I want to put what I've learned into action. I have learned through the past 2 years working as patient ombudsman about the gaps in our healthcare system. I want to work with patients and families and healthcare providers and all of my colleagues at Queen's Park to make our healthcare system better and stronger. But I've also had the opportunity to work as a bank auditor in a time before I entered politics. I understand reading complex financial statements, and I want to go line by line by line through 15 years of Liberal government waste and mismanagement. I want to be the auditor that goes in and cleans up Kathleen Wynne's mess. And it's not enough just to say that you're going to do that. I have taken Kathleen Wynne on at Queen's Park many, many times, and I can tell you I look forward to doing it again, because we need a leader that can go head-to-head and toe-to-toe with her. Please join us, because I know that together we can win that majority progressive Conservative government on June 7th. Thank you.
Thank you to all 4 of you. Well, that concludes our debate. I want to say thank you to those who took the time to submit questions on the party's website, and a big thank you to our candidates for your participation tonight.